Kind of like my image of the ovary. And I kind of went back through and split these in multiple ways. And so just basic in terms of some of the parts and actually our follicular development. We'll get into some histology and stuff later. But of course, like I told you, make sure you know the ovary going to sit right up in here, and depending upon speed, whether it's going to be completely covered or it's just kind of held in there with the membrane. So primary functions right there, the ovary, we said produce the female gametes. One other different thing than maybe what we've seen before, produces female sex hormones. For me, guys, monococcus right here, and that just basically means that we're releasing one egg or ovum at a time. Poly right here means these animals are going to be more likely to have litters. So we're going to get into mainly our hogs on that one. Now, primary histology, core right up in here, it's going to, all blood flow and stuff is going to be your medulla. Your cortex is going to be your outer layer for most of your species. We'll talk about the mare in just a little bit where these are reversed, but cortex on the outside is going to hold that egg nest and the same processes that we talked about all the way through. Your image right there, you can just kind of go through and see. Exception to the rule, make sure you understand this one right here. But they're going to be absolutely reversed. And so what you end up with, another good thing, make sure you know, is an ovulation foci. And because that cortex can be up in here, you are not able to palpate or check that CL, that corpus luteum that we have on the outside right here. So in terms of us palpating, and that's why I use ultrasound more when we get into horses, but cortex is going to be reversed, medulla is going to be on the outside, and then that's why we have to sit here. We can't palpate. We get into types right here. It's showing the difference, and you can see the old right there, CLs that are on the outside of those. And then cortex outside, pretty normal, exactly the opposite. Now we've already talked and visited about, but all the oocytes of females are going to produce. This all occurs during fetal development. And actually, if we get to looking at some numbers, 20 weeks right here, we start looking at numbers at 20 weeks, we're 6 to 7 million. And then at birth right here, we've lost probably 80%. All occur inside. Realize that by birth, they've already lost part of them. The major structures of the ovary, make sure you know them. And you believe if you happen to draw that out on that other furothiel, that you're going to have to know and understand exactly the process and what goes through. Now, make sure you know, guys, and you understand these. And if you draw that process out in terms of follicular development, you're going to realize those primordial follicles are going to be those that are in the egg nest. And then as they're released, and our primary ones, and they're going to have a single layer of granulosa cells. And the biggest thing that's going to make the difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary is going to come back to those same granulosa cells. So those are the ones we find in the egg nests, and we start recruiting or release of them. Secondary follicle here is where we just turn around and we put one more layer on it. And so where we've got just our same little basic one right here, then all of a sudden we come back and we put another layer, and that's our secondary one. Tertiary is going to be when we start to fill it up full with a cavity. And so that's when we're going to have the fluid. And then we call that spot or that cavity right there is going to be your antrum. And so that's when we're at tertiary graphium follicle. And this is the one here that's going to become your dominant follicle, or the one that's going to probably release. Most follicles will become atritic, which means they are going to degenerate, and they'll never be at a point where they release an egg. So a tertiary follicle, the graphium follicle right there is filled with fluid. You can see it quite a bit better. Here's your actual egg, potential little ovum here. It's got a little layer of those cells around it. Granulosa cells in here. So you think of external, gonna be here, and they look kind of a little more of a kind of a stratified or even a squamous, or a little tougher, if we start talking about an outside layer. So they're gonna be the little fibrous layer that kind of protects the whole shape. Think of internal, Actually, it's going to be right up in here next to the granulosa cells, and it's going to work with the granulosa cells for production of estrogen. Granulosa cells are going to be split up into two classifications on them, or areas, classifications, but two locations. So your cumulus ovorus is the part right here, and then right here at the close, your corona radiata are the ones that were first, when we went back in our first production, in our first second layer right up in here for cells. Your corona radiata is going to be those here, whereas your cumulus ovorus is going to be surrounding the antrum and the actual follicle. Now your final little, your egg nest right up here, your primordial follicles. We get released, we have our primary follicles. We come back in with that secondary layer right there of granulosa cells. For secondary, we end up with our antrum formation here that kicks us back in to our tertiary or our final form with it. Remember there, our cumulus ovorus, all the way around, and your radiata are the ones that are exactly right here around. That actually, when we release the egg, the corona radiata is still sitting here and attached. And then once we're done, a real cool thing, those granulosa cells and thick internal cells, they become your luteal cells that produce progesterone. So both of them right there are going to be involved, and all this is showing, guys, that cholesterol is going to form testosterone first, and even the mechanism to get rid of testosterone in a male is conversion to estradiol and then excretion. And so anyway, I'm going to get conversion or synthesis right here, testosterone. It's going to cross the cells, and then inside the granulosa cell is going to be the conversion of that testosterone right there to estradiol. So just to sit here and look, right before ovulation, you got those corona radiata cells right here, oocyte, eggs getting released. Those same thecal cells right here and granulosa cells are going to end up being your ones that sit here and synthesize progesterone. We don't end up with a CL holding that pregnancy, then what we end up with is just a little scar. Little scar right there on the outside, just going to show us where a CL used to be.